Let's set up here. Okay, here we go. So Mammar, there's only two Mammar, two discourses in on the Parsha of Bo, and this is the first one. It's talking about the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim. So the pasuk says, at the time of the Exodus, it says, "Be'etzem Yom Hazeh," in the middle, so to say, but the central part of the day, Yatzu Kol Tzivos Hashem Eretz Mitzrayim, the army of God, the hosts of God, so to say, left Egypt. In the M'amar Zal al Chana, our rabbis have taught us about Chana. Chana was the mother of the prophet Samuel. That Miyoim, and she has the famous prayer in the beginning of Samuel, praying for David and for her son. Before and after she has Samuel. So it says, Hini M'amar Zal, our rabbis have taught us al Chana. Yom Shabar Kadosh Baruch Hu Asaloimai V'Loi Haya Adam Shekara LaKadosh Baruch Hu Tzavakos Ad Shabal Chana Shabas Chana. That up from the time God created His world until Chana, no one referred to God with the name of Tzavakos, which we call Lord of Hosts, until Chana. Chana was the first to use that name for God, meaning the Hainu Shehi Pascha Tchila Likras HaKadosh Baruch Hu Havaya Tzavakos. She's the first one who called Hashem, and Hashem is just starting, who referred to Hashem with the name of the Lord Havaya Tzavakos, of hosts. Hosts is plural. We're going to understand why no one used that name until her time, and what does it mean to use that name. It's not just that we could give names to God. And God was satisfied with her using that term, and he said, Asid ben Shalach, in the future, your son, referring to Samuel, is Liftarach Menevuah B'Shem Zeh. He will start off a prophecy using this name for God, as it says, and Samuel said, Kay Amar Hashem Tzivakos Bekadati. So he starts with the prophecy, and he starts the prophecy with Hashem Tzivakos, the Lord of hosts. And once Shmuel, which is the beginning of the prophets, but he's considered he's obviously many years after Moshe, Vanavim Achreinim, and the later prophets, meaning the ones around this destruction of the first temple, Nivu B'Shem Zeh, they use that name more often. Ubefrat, specifically the prophets of Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, which were around the destruction and the rebuilding already of the second temple. They used even more frequently the name Tzavakos, Yosim Mikulan, more than any of the other prophets before them. The Kaimelan, and the Mishnah teaches us about the name Tzavakos, who mean Hashem Hashem Chalkim. It's one of the names of God, references of God, that one cannot erase. There's 7 holy names of God, and you can't erase them. Meaning, what does it mean you can't erase them? If you're writing it in a sefer, once you've written it, you can't erase it. Like you can't erase the name of Yud Ke Vav Ke or Alikim, or Atnai or Kel. So Tzavakos is on that range of names. So to understand what's this all mean, and why did we have to wait till Chana and Samuel to start using the name Tzavakos? So first, to understand this, what does it mean that God has names? And also amongst the names, we need to understand the Shem Havaya, the name Yud Ke Vav Ke of God. What's unique specifically about that name versus the other names? Al Shar Shemos. And afterwards, after we understand what is the idea of the name and what is the idea of the name Yud Ke Vav Ke and how it's different than the other names, Yisbarim Yiras Hashem will, God willing, explain the name Inyan Shem Tzavakos, the name Lord of the name hosts. Is he need to do it known? Shemuhusei ve'atzmusei shal ha'ein seif baruch hu. The essence and essential of the infinite of God, blessed be He, who pashit b'tachlis hapshitus. This is something that's a description that's not understood. God is pashit, means simple in the essence of simplicity. What is the definition of simple? We don't mean simple as in plain. Simple as in undefined. When something is defined, it has a certain character. Saying something is kind is the character. The character is defined as a kind being or kind person. Someone who is judgmental or din or has boundaries. or Teves, any of those, yeah, that's not simple. That's defined. There's a definitive way to understand the character of this person. God at his essence, the mahusai, vatzmusai, the essence essential of the infinite is pashut, is simple in the most simplistic way, i.e., there's no definition, no character traits, etc. Means say, when it comes to the essence of God, there is no description. A Torah means a descriptive name, right? Someone's a doctor. So by definition, you're describing that person as a person in the medical field that can heal, hopefully. So there isn't, God essentially has no way of having any description. So when you find in the Torah that they describe God with the prophets in different terms, as God being wise, chassid, he's kind, rachaman, he's compassionate. Even compassion is a description. That's not the essence of God. That's a manifestation. Because the essence of God is meroimam v'niskav, is elevated and above, umuvdal, and separate, mikol gedarm elu, from any of these descriptions or labels. The reason why I say it's hard for us to understand, because we are made up, we have character traits. It's hard to understand what does it mean to be, how do you define, how does something exist? Means our definition of something that exists is by definition of the characters. A smart person, a less smart person, a kind person, a less kind person, a talented person. What is it that's where is the chayus, where's the essential life that has no description? It's harder for us to grasp that concept. But the idea of the description is a descent. It's not essential. Shachachma, for instance, the highest of descriptions, which is chachma, wisdom. Shehamayla Rishona b'Nivraim, which is the most elevated of qualities within a creation. How do we know it's the most elevated? Because as we go up the food chain, we have domam, lifeless, we have tzomeach, things that grow, we have chai, things that are alive. Adam has the idea, has seichel, which has the ability to have chachma, not instinct, but chachma, to actually have wisdom. And within the people themselves, the level of your wisdom. So what does it mean, chachma? When we describe God as being a chacham, wise, or using wisdom, it's an action. Just like an action is nothing to do with the essential of the person, so too wisdom is not part of the essence of God. And like it says, God made the world with chachma. It's to use the word asiya, action. And even more so, the emotions that we describe God with as chacham, as chesed, as being kind, rachman, as being compassionate, that's even more further away from the essence of God. Or not, I cannot say more because it's an either or, but it's more to say it's that the description is a lower description, because animals are already the fact that within the person, the level of midos is the animal within the person. And that's lower than the Adam, the man of the person. And this is like what we say every Friday night, brought down from the Pasach Eliyahu, is the lav mikol ilan midas ihu klal. God is not described at all in any emotional way. Any of the midos that we have, that's not the essence of God. He manifests into being. That's the whole description. The Pasach Eliyahu is trying to explain to us what are the Esser spheres, what are the 10 character traits, so to say, that we know God as, though it's not Him. That's God manifesting in the way of kindness. Ukinoida, as is known, nevertheless, so although that we just said that God is above any kind of, he's pashut apshitus, he's the simplistic of all simple, undescribed, undefined, without any character traits. Nevertheless, Chazal are both the Chumash and the rabbis and the Mishnah and the Medrash is full of descriptions of God. Taino derech Mammar Zal. And so what does that mean then? If we're saying that God is above description, above not just description, because we can't understand His kindness, because that even the kindness of the highest kindness we don't understand, but God is beyond even that level of kindness. He's pashut. God is not made up of any character traits. When we say God is compassionate, the compassionate God, it's a manifestation that he manifests within the level of compassion. So again, it's hard for us to grasp this idea. We don't know ourselves differently from our midos or our chachma. So he says, the Hainu Aderech Mammar is like it says, where you find God to be great, means you could say, wow, God is great. Then you will find an vinasanusa, you will find his humility. He humbles himself so we can understand him as being great, because he's beyond any description. And if he's beyond the description, so we can't understand him as being great. So if he wants us to understand him as being great, he has to lower himself to be described as being great. That's why the earlier Kabbalists didn't refer to God's kindness as kindness, but gedula, greatness. He humbles and lowers himself. Mislavish, to enclothe himself. The Eser Kalim Datzilis, in the 10 vessels of the beginning of creation, was his world of emanation, where God is the simplicity of God. That's the connection we're going to learn. There's the Or, the light, and then there's the Keli, the vessel. The Or is the simple light, but even the simple light itself is already a manifestation as a light, as opposed to the essence of God is beyond even being a source of light, or that he manifests light. But the light itself is simple, and then it goes into the keli, into the vessel, to be defined into depending on which light, the light goes into which vessel. So the light itself is simple, and the vessel defines the light. I'll try to explain it over here. Shamhu he lowers himself. To humble himself into the 10 vessels of the world of Atzilus. A world is already part of creation, even though it's beyond the world of Bria, but it's already after the Tzimtzum Hagadol, the first contraction. Shehein v'chinas chesed the Gvura, and the vessels already are defined as chesed and Gvura. And the third, and that's the midos, and beyond that the gimel rishonos, which is chachma bin and das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And then when he manifests in those vessels, so then you could say he's kind, because now he's manifesting as kind. But just to give a little background, the brief, before we go into the further, is the kelim themselves, the vessels themselves have to be created by God as well. There's nothing that exists outside of God. For instance, if you're going to have a liquid that goes into different measuring cups, just to give an example of size. So you have different measuring cups. You can have one cup, 2 cups, 3 cups, right, in size, like when you measure for cooking. So the liquid is simple. The cup is already created. There's no real relationship between the liquid and the cup. The only relationship is when you place the liquid in the cup, but the cup has its own existence. But by God, there is no its own existence, that God's light goes into something that pre-exists and therefore it's defined. He has to also create the definition, which is the cup, which is the vessel. So there's an Or, a special, specific light that creates, so to say, almost a lifeless vessel, that lifeless vessel has a character. And when God manifests the light of creation, so to say, of manifestation in the light, in the vessel, then the light gets defined as, he gives a life to that character, and now God becomes defined as a God of kindness. But it's all the components are created by God. Both the light, that's what I'm saying, the light itself is not God. It's a manifestation from God. And there's a separate force that creates the definition, which is the vessel. Gives life to the vessel to contain and define the light once it goes into it. This is the complexity of the concept of Oris and Kalim, of light and vessels. And these are the names of God. When the light goes into the vessel, God is defined in the different names of Hashem. And what we're going to lead to is, what does that mean when it comes to the name Tzavakos, Lord of Hosts? For instance, when God, because there's in Atzilus, there is the vessel of Chachma, of wisdom, Shnikra Chacham, then when the light goes into the vessel of Chachma, so God now is known to us. And again, the vessels in Atzilus are way beyond our comprehension of what it means to have wisdom, but we understand the concept of it. For instance, just like we can't understand the depth or wisdom of the smartest person, let's say Einstein, but we know that he's smart, but you maybe don't understand the depth of his smart. But we know when we're talking about a person that's smart. Because he enclosed himself in the vessel of Chachma. Like Eliyahu says, like I said, this is all part of the Pesach Eliyahu. Ant Chakim, you are wise. Why? Because you manifest in the definition of wisdom through the light going into the vessel of wisdom. Pirish Shemisaper, that he's telling us in his humility, Shemash he lowers himself and humbles himself. To enclose himself in the vessel of wisdom. Although, notwithstanding that the definition of chachma is way beneath, or not even at all close to the essence of God. So there's the third party here, so to say. What's the third party? The level of God that creates the vessel. That's why when there's the whole conversation about loy v'loy l'midaisav, you're supposed to pray to God, not his attributes. What does it mean, not his attributes? We want to get to the essence of God. What does it mean, not his attribute? What are you saying, not his attributes? So the Baal Shem Tov says it's the power that defines the vessel, because there's a power of God that makes that the vessel should be a vessel of chachma. That has to come from the most simple part of God that's beyond the chachma, that makes the definition of chachma, of wisdom. And the Alter Rebbe says, "Loy v'loy l'midaisav" means the prayer of a child. It means no vessels, no nothing. A child says God. A child doesn't know anything, doesn't know about lights and vessels, just knows there's a God. And if he or she has a problem, he says, like, praise to God. Without all the kavanot, without all these intentions of figuring out the lights and the energies, etc. And that's v'loy, that's the God and not his attributes. Okay, let's go back to the text. So he says, "V'chein mash v'latzmei lislabesh." V'chinas chesed, and so too he clothes himself in the vessel of kindness, chesed, v'nikras gadol, then he's called great. Like I said, the earlier Kabbalist called the attribute of chesed greatness. It's great to be kind. Ay chesed, or he's kind. And why is to be great? His humility. Only because he humbles himself, hashbal, and lowers himself. Then clothe himself to be defined as chesed. Then you could call him great. Otherwise, how could you define him? You don't even know how to call him anything. But the essence of God is above all this. Meaning to say, fundamentally, the neshama comes also beyond the vessels, comes from the essence of God, way beyond the vessels. At its core, the essence, the essence of the soul also is connected to the essence of God beyond the description. But it's not in our consciousness. The yechida, these are our subconscious levels of the soul. Most of our being is subconscious, but the conscious level is defined by our definitive ways of understanding things of chachma, of what is considered smart, what is considered emotion, what is the proper emotional response to a certain thing, what should be the proper emotion. In God's compassion, B'rachmecha Rabbim, in your great compassion, have compassion in us. We at least want God. We're trying to identify the concept of compassion, because that's within our consciousness. We're not conscious at all to our essential connection, where the essence of the soul is connected to the essence of God, and our connection is beyond the Jewish connection is beyond the way God manifests in the Kalim, but it's not in our conscious. So for us to praise God, that has to come from our consciousness. And therefore, if we say God's great, we have to be able to understand greatness, and therefore God has to lower himself to be understood as great. He says like this. So, Mashen Kain, however, but the essence of God is much above this concept. Now, that's the idea of the names. What does it mean, the name? What are these different names that we have for God? Like a name is a title, okay? And the names themselves, like the Alter Rebbe here is more talking short tone. In the same Mammar from his son, the Mittel Rebbe, these things are explained much more. There's essential names, and there's action names, and there's title names, right? There's I'm in surgery, or I'm a surgeon, not the same thing. The names of God, these are the vessels. The spheres of the 10 sphirot kochas in the world of Atzilus. Shemislabish ben Arin Saif, that the infinite light. So now once we have the vessels, which are definitive, each one of the 10 has its character, whether in wisdom or emotions. So when the infinite light, again, the light is already a manifestation that there's light. The Ma'or, the source of light, the essence of God, is beyond that it gives off light. So the light already is connected to the idea that it should give off light, and therefore because it's kavanah, that's the reason why light exists is so there should be brightness. Light exists so there should be brightness in the world, and the brightness in our case is talking about godliness in the world. So the brightness has a purpose, but before it goes into the vessels, it's just bright without a definition. Once it goes into the vessels, now it has a definition of kindness, compassion, etc., or severity. The names are the vessels. The Eser spheres, the Atzilus, in the world of Atzilus. Shemislavish behem are in safe that the infinite light, it's already a manifestation. And then it's the difference is like this: that in the example I gave of the liquid and the cup are not connected. The liquid is only connected to the cup as a measurement, as a size. That there's only a cup amount of water in the cup, but the cup is separate from the liquid. In the case of the light in the vessels, once the light goes into the vessels, it unifies to such a way that it's not a light and a vessel, it becomes one entity. Like the example is, in this case, the soul and the body. The soul isn't separate from the body. When the soul goes into the body, it becomes an alive person. The eyes of the person that sees is the soul and the body seeing together. It's not that the body sees something. It's not only that the soul sees something, it's the person that sees something. It becomes one entity. So he says, when it goes, becomes one with them, an essential oneness. He and his vessels are one. Hainu, that means Shem Kel hu bechinas kli chesed. For instance, the name Kel, Aleph Lamed, is the vessel that defines God as kind. V'Shem Elokim, the name Elokim, is bechinas kli hagvura, is the way God is in a severe attribute. V'Shem Adonai, and God is Lord, Adonai, Master, is Malchus, is King, right? So those are all the names that become one, and then it becomes the name that expresses God as kind, and so is, what attribute is midas hachesed? So what attribute is, when we talk about Yom Kippur, midas hachesed, midas harachamim. That's all the different names that have a definition, a character. Once it becomes one, God becomes one with that character trait. But the name Havaya Yudke Vavke, who apnimis shakol Hashem is Shem Hakelim. That's not a description of the way God is connected to the vessel and gets the character of the vessel. It's a description of the light that goes into the vessel that becomes described as a God of kindness. We talk about in the Gemara. The Gemara says God divides his day into 4 parts of his studying. He studies himself, he judges, and then he goes up from midas adin to midas harachmim. What it means, he changes character. So that's all. That's the essence of God. That's the representation, not of the essence of the light of God. It is the inner part of the names which are the vessels. That is the light that goes into the vessel. When you say kel, that God is kind, the name of kindness or greatness. The light that comes from the infinite, Baruch Hu, blessed be He, to go into this vessel. That is Havayit. So Havayit represents the manifestation of the simplicity of the light before the definition. So when we say Hashem, we want to go beyond the description, but that's still an or. It's still a shame. It's a name. Anochi is I. Havaya is a name. That's what God is telling the Jewish people by Mount Sinai. Anochi, the essence of Havaya, Elokecha, is Hashem, your Lord. It's all one. He's telling us that it's all one. When God is manifest, the name Elokim, which is severity or limitations or boundaries. That's Havaya in the vessel of Elokim. It's the light from the infinite. It's the or of the Ein Sof. It's not the Ein Sof. It's the light of the infinite that goes into that vessel. That applies to all the names that may not be erased, are forbidden to be erased. Those are the names that can't be erased, are the vessels of the world of Atzilus. And Havaya is the light that goes into them. What is the midas of Teferes? Teferes is Havaya of Havaya. It's the vessel of Havaya with the name of Havaya. That's why it has the ability of inclusion. It's multiple colors, multiple characters. That's Teferes, made up of different emotions. But he doesn't go into the midah of Teferes in this Mammar. That's why we find in the Torah and the scripture that uses the two names together. The day God made Havaya Elokim, because Havaya is the light and Elokim is the description, is the vessel. Eretz v'Shamayim, heaven and earth, and it says Havaya Tzavakos, Lord of hosts. That's why he goes into the name of Tzavakos. We didn't get into describe what that name means yet, but it exists. It is the conduit that takes the light of the infinite, into the names of Elikim Utzvakos, Shehem HaKelim, which are the vessels. It's the in-between, intermediary, between the lights Vakelim. So here he's saying actually something a little different. That's not, first he said it's the light itself. And here he's explaining what does it mean, bechinas ha'oros? It's really the in-between, so to say, the energy that pulls the light into the vessels. We connects the lights with the vessels. So as we get a little further in this in the paragraph, he describes more. It's not the light itself, but the force that brings the light into the vessels. And it says, this is my name forever. This is how I should be remembered. Pirush b'tikkunei Zohar, Shmi im Yudke, if you take the letter Shmi, which means my name, which is the number value of 350, right? Shin is 300, Mem is 40, and Yud is 10. It makes it 350. And you add to that the first two letters of God's name, Yud is an additional 15, is 365, which represent the 365 prohibitions, loisase. And if you take the number value of Zichri, which Reish is 10, is 200, and Chaf is 20, and you add the Yud is 30, and then you add this, the Zayin is 237, add to that the Vav K, which is 11, and it gives you Ramach 248 positive commandments. So it's mitzvah say. This means to say that the Torah, which are the Ramach mitzvahs aseh, the 248 positive commandments, v'shasa loisa saying the 365 prohibitions, hey mushrashim b'shem avaya. That's why it's called Torah Savaya, because the name of Hashem makes up these mitzvahs. Because just like the world, Olam b'chesed yibana, the world is created with kindness, but Torah is beyond the world. So just like the name of Havaya is beyond the vessels, so too Torah is beyond the vessels, and that's how we bring the inner, the pneumius of the intention of creation comes through Havaya. That's why it's called Torah Havaya. The vessels themselves, hypothetically, existence, the world is created for Torah. But the world was existing many years before the Torah was given. God conditioned creation. He made a condition with creation that it will not continue to exist if the Jews don't accept the Torah. But it did exist until then. It was on notice. It wouldn't exist, and you could say it would never have existed. You call it whatever you want, but it existed technically in time and space up until the Matan Torah. When the Jews accepted it, it cemented that it will exist. So the existence of the world comes from the way God is in the names, because that's creation. That's God. Say the Shtalshlus. Torah is beyond that. That's the Pneumius, that's the inner intention of creation. That's the Shem Havaya, like the inner light in every name. And that's why the name of Hashem is within Torah. And the positive commandments come from the level of chesed, but its core is beyond that, but it's manifest kindness because it's doing things. And the prohibitions come from things you shouldn't be doing, din, judgment, boundaries, don't do that. And there is included all the laws, the details, what's permitted or not permitted, what is kosher, and what is possible, not kosher. Chayiv, what person is considered obligated, v'zakai, what person is considered worthy in every situation of life. Meaning to say like this, just like we say that Havaya is the light that goes into the vessel, so too Torah is beyond really at its core is beyond the vessels. It encloses itself in the vessels, and therefore the positive commandments come from the name of Chesed. It's things that are positive. You're positively bringing down every time you do a mitzvah life into the world. And the name, the 365 prohibitions are things you should not be doing, which is the way the light of Havaya goes into the name of Elokim, which are limitations. But he says, therefore, and if you're going to do a prohibition, that's why you get punished. If you do a positive commandment, you get a reward. That's coming from the name of Chesed. Why do you get a punishment for a prohibition? Because you shouldn't be doing it. It's all connected to the name Elokim, which is Gvura, severity. Who Malush became the sun. It's the infinite light that is within all these vessels. That he and his vessels become one. That's the whole idea of the name of Havai, Yud Kivavke. So basically, once this system is created, so when a person does Torah mitzvahs in this world, you're connected to this essence of God. It all becomes one. Anochi Hashem Lekecha becomes one, and this is what and our connection to continuing to bring life into the world is through Torah mitzvahs. And this is understood. And now we understand why up until Chana, Samuel's mother, we never mentioned the name Tzavakis. Again, because a name is you have to say the reason why there's a name is for a relationship. The name is on the receiving side. It's for the person who needs to know you, or how to identify you, or how to understand you, right? You all go into the yellow pages, like once one did, and to look, you want to know who a doctor is, you have to be listed under doctors. So you have to have the title to be able to have that connection, that relationship. When a person says, now I'm not the teacher, I'm just the person you met in the store, stop talking to me about your child, is because I'm no longer in the moment of being a teacher. I'm beyond that. I went back to myself, so to say. So the names are how we connect to Hashem. So up until that point of Samuel's mother, there was not a necessity for the name of Tzivakos. The way the system was, the way the lights were in the world of Atzilus. Like I said, the light of Havaya went into Chesed, the light of Havaya went into Gvura, which represented the Torah mitzvahs. You did what you're supposed to do. You did not do what you shouldn't do. The relationship was fine. We didn't need to bring that name further down into levels because we were doing something that it wasn't working as the relationship up until this point was working. When it stopped working, so to say, the Jewish people were not keeping the Torah mitzvahs. So there had to be a level that's deeper connected to the people beyond the commandments of Torah mitzvahs, where the prophets could speak to the people and say, why are you not performing the Torah mitzvah? So that's what it says, and up until the point of Chana, the name Tzavakis is not mentioned. God, Chana started and said, Lord of hosts. Things started, that was the beginning of the times of the kings, right? Samuel is the one who anointed the kings. And she talks about that in her prayer. Because Moshe, when he gave the Torah, not saying that he was worthy and merited that the Torah should be given via him. What does it mean that he brought down the Torah? He brought down the infinite light, the light into the vessels of Zah through the mitzvah, through giving the Torah and the mitzvahs. And that's why he brought the Torah. And the Torah was the way God was one with his attributes in the world of Atzilus. It wasn't just that he was functioning, but also that was his prophecy on that level of oneness. Moshe Rabbeinu was in the world of Atzilus, absolute godliness. Totally, the difference between the world of Atzilus and the lower worlds is: are you totally nullified? There's no existence outside of God, or are you submitting yourself to God? Bitul Hayesh, that's the difference between Joseph. Joseph was also in the world of Atzilus. The great tzaddikim are in the world of Atzilus. Joseph was beyond his brothers. The brothers were only able to see that we are going to submit ourselves to God. Joseph said, let me elevate you higher. That's why they were dreaming that's why he was dreaming that their bushels of wheat were bound to Joseph. Because yes, you gathered all the wheat, you made a bushel of wheat, but now you have to elevate it to lose your identity. You have meaning not to lose your identity in a negative way, but to become one with Hashem in the world of Atzilus, which is where Moshe was also. But he went to us who were lower than him, but he himself stayed as an entity of the world of Atzilus, the oneness of God. like he would speak, Anachnu ma, we are what? He was totally nullified to Hashem. But he himself didn't bring down that God should become one with the world of separation. Bria starts the separation. A creation, by definition, is separate. It's created by Hashem. That God should become one with the creation. That, so to say, that within the separation, there should be godliness in a oneness, because everything is God. The question is how connected is that, again, in our consciousness? As he was in the world of Atzilus, that God should also become one with the separations. That's when we talk about all these angels talking on behalf of God, all these prophets talking on behalf of God. Lord of hosts, what's host? Host is multiple, different definitions. So that's already the world of creation. Moshe didn't add that in. And the reason he didn't do it because it wasn't necessary. By bringing down the oneness of God in the world of Atzilus, the Jewish people connected to that. It spoke to them. It all became one. He and his vessels became one. But in the world of separation and creation, God didn't become one with the different definitions of separation. But that's Moshe's times. But as the prophets lived in further generations, after Moshe, he brought that the infinite light that becomes one with the vessels should come one with the vessels in the world of creation as well. That didn't happen in the days of Moshe. And where did this all start? God, Chana started to say, God, the Lord of hosts. All those hosts, the definition is also godliness. She revealed the godliness within the vessels of the world of creation. And once she started that, all the prophets followed her lead. Means that the light continues down the chain into the world of creation, becomes one with more separation. As will be explained. Now but before he says that it was necessary. Chana didn't just do it; he did it for a reason. When Moshe Rabbeinu was our leader, that he prophesied from the world of Atzilus. He was talking about the oneness of God. He introduced the idea of Mesiras Nefesh in the Shema Yisrael. The Jewish people were on a much more elevated level. He brought them down the Torah from that world. And then they connected to that. They understood by doing the mitzvahs, they were positive mitzvahs. They were connecting to the name of Hashem as it goes into chesed, kindness, and by watching the prohibitions, they were connecting to the name of the Gevura. After Moshe's times and the days of the prophets, doesn't talk about the days of the judges because that's not sure what happened then, but maybe that was just like an in-between time. The Jewish people were not doing what Hashem wanted. You could translate that in both ways. The Alter Rebbe usually translates that, whether they weren't doing God's will or weren't creating God's will, but it's all the same idea. They weren't doing the Torah mitzvahs. The Jewish and the prophets had to admonish them for not performing and not keeping the Torah mitzvahs. And what's the difference when a prophet admonishes the people, or someone who just says words of admonishment to someone else? When a person admonishes someone, you're saying, listen, the Torah says you shouldn't be doing this, why are you doing this? When the prophet says it, it's God talking. He's talking, the prophet, God is talking through the prophet. That's the definition of a prophet. A prophet's not telling you ideas, he's talking on behalf of Hashem. Through Hashem's talking through him. Who's the one who's admonishing? It's God himself. In order for the Jewish people, you can't admonish someone from the place of where the problem is. You have to come further down and say, why aren't you keeping the mitzvahs? But if they're talking from the world of Atzilus, if they're not keeping the Torah mitzvahs, why would they listen to the admonishment? There has to be a voice coming lower down, more relatable to them, to say, what's going on, guys? Why aren't you keeping the Torah mitzvahs? It had to come down further into our world. We should be able to relate to it. Kadeshi Kami Yisrael Torah, the Jewish people should keep the Torah mitzvahs. As things were in the higher worlds, it was so spiritual and godly. They weren't keeping the Torah. They felt a disconnect. Didn't feel connected to the message of Torah. Mitzad, was too high for them. Torah was this godly idea. But when Torah came in mamish into our details of our life, it becomes part of our identity and part of our experience. So it means we're bringing God further down into the world, which is a level, that's the idea of dir b'tachtonim, but it wasn't for the right reasons 100%. It was also because we weren't relating to God on a more spiritual level. Moshe's level was above the Jewish people. In the later generations, in his own generation, it worked. Therefore, Torah had a further descendant into the world of creation. And the word of God came in that language, in the jargon that he understood. That they should keep the Torah. It means nothing's changed in the performance of the actual mitzvah, besides the different siyagim, fences that the Nevi'im gave us. I'm saying that there's 630 mitzvahs, that didn't change, they didn't add anything. They just brought it down in a way for us to be able to perform, connect it more. And they admonished God in a language that the Jewish people understood. Became the Biyah, Misham Piyah Navi, and that's where the prophet spoke from, the world of creation. Now he addresses the question I just asked. Even though a prophet's not allowed to do anything new, so how could Chana, so to say, bring godliness down to a lower level? So this is not, God forbid, that she was adding anything to Moshe's Torah. She was bringing in a way that the Jewish people could relate to it. This is what it means, the name of hosts that started from Chana to be used by the prophets. What does Tzavos mean? Legions, soldiers. And these are regiments of souls and angels, debris in the world of creation. There's no counting of the regiments of the angels. And these themselves are creations. It's not like a manifestation of godliness. The difference between the world of Atzilus, which is just an expression of godliness, and the world of Bria, these are creations. In the world of Atzilus, it's godliness. Here it's creations, where God creates. Through Chana and the prophets afterwards, they were bringing godliness to become one with the angel. With one absolute oneness. Again, within the souls are connected essentially with God all the way at the core. But it's a level of conscious connection. Where does it become a conscious connection? Where's the subconscious? Chana brought it down that within the world of souls, it should be even in the world of Bria, there should be a conscious revelation of our connection to God. Just as God became one with the vessels of Atzilus. Again, it's a very complex concept, idea of Chassidus. It doesn't make it less necessary to know or less true, obviously, just because we don't understand it 100%. So we're trying to understand it the best that we can. It's very hard for us to understand these things because it's really skimmering beyond our who we are. Till God became one with the vessels in the world of Bria, of creation. God himself became the host. Shehu Shem HaTorah became a description of God. He is the host. The angels are Malach Elikim. Just like God is one with his vessels in the world of Atzilus. He is the knowledge. Although we said in the beginning that just like in the world of Atzilus, it's a downgrade. God defines himself to be Deya, Das, understanding. God is the simple of all simplicity. Again, the challenge we have in understanding all this is understanding the root of it. That the simplicity of God is something that's beyond our comprehension. We can't understand simplicity. What does it mean? An entity and not just an entity of existence. The force of all entities is something that has no definition. Became the Biyah, so to God further connect with something that's closer to our understanding, which is the world of creation. Because then it was necessary, because it was in the world of Atzilus, it was beyond us, and we weren't relating to God in that level. He is the Lord of hosts. It's not just that they submit themselves to God. They become one with God totally. Okay, this has to be understood 100% in the right way, otherwise it leads people to think foolish thoughts. Okay, just like the soul becomes one with the body. Even though the body is just a vessel. The main thing is the soul. Nevertheless, the functions that the person does is only when the soul is in the body. Most of the things that the person, when we say the person, we mean that's the body and soul, is able to do is only when the soul is in the body. Obviously, that doesn't apply to God, that he's limited. But the soul can express the taste, seeing, feeling. Most of the expressions of the soul are only expressions when it's in the body. Shinikra Adam, that is Adam, that is the person, that's the human. The soul and Shamash Book with the soul in the body. The person is not a body and a soul. A person is a person. It's like a turtle, that its shell is part of the being of the turtle. It doesn't have a shell. It's not like other animals or other things that have clothing. The shell is part of the body, part of who the turtle is. Just like we would call a person, once the person studies something of wisdom, now that person becomes a wise person. The wisdom was there before. It was in the book. The book is an old book. The idea is an old idea. So what happened? Once the person learned it, that knowledge becomes part of you, you become a wise person. Not that you're a person that studied something wise. Even though the wisdom on itself before is its own entity, besides the person who learned it, the proof is it existed before the person. And there's another person who could learn that wisdom. The person, until he learned it or she learned it, was its own entity. But once the person studied that idea and developed it, now you become a wise person, even though the wisdom was separate initially. Because then it becomes a description of who you are. But who are you now? You became a person that's the person who's wise because you've studied something of wisdom. So too. Even though the vessels are of the world of creation are even more separate, essentially, from God, like the person separate from the wisdom. These are souls and angels, creations. They're just nullified to God. Nevertheless, when the prophets brought godliness in to be revealed, like the wisdom in the person, just like it was one in the world of Atzilus, he becomes the Lord of hosts. It's the description of God himself. God is one with the regiments. They're not two separate beings. Therefore we say Hashem Tzavakis. The name of Avaya is, like we said, all the way back, the light that goes into the vessels in the world of Atzilus. I'm going a little faster because we have to finish. Or in Seif became Atzilus. Vim Kain. Kdeishis Mashech. Or in Seif Bibiyahu. Aidei Shem Avaya Betchila V'Zeh Avaya Tzavakis. We have to take Havaya, bring it all the way down into the world of creation, and becomes one with the host. Now he says, and then once they made, so to say, they made godliness one, so to say, with the level of host. Then the prophets start to talk as God would talk in that manifestation. That's where they got the prophecy from. Imagine when people take who's Chana. Chana is just the mother Shmuel. She's not just the mother Shmuel. She started a whole nother idea. Dvar Shem Mamish. It's God, the prophet is God talking to the Jewish people. It's not someone else who just says something, why aren't you keeping the Torah mitzvahs? God is talking to the Jewish people. When Jeremiah spoke, God was speaking. This is God talking, God admonishing. Now he goes into a complicated idea, but to say it fast. How do you do that? Okay, it's nice that they did it, but what does it mean to bring godliness down into even to the world of creation? Because, like I said before, God essentially is simplistic. Simplistic is not a line. A line has a beginning, and the top of the line means this is the beginning, and the bottom of the line goes down. Circular has no beginning, no end. God is beyond, even the world of Atzilus is beyond God, like we said before, that the name God makes a light, and the light goes into the vessels. Or the Shem Havaya brings the light into the vessels, however we want to say it. But that's already, there's definitions, that's already part of Seder Shtalshus, chain of creation. But the eagle, the circular, is beyond any definition. And from the level of the circular, there's no real difference if God is one with the vessels of Atzilus, or he's one with the vessels of Bria, and the world of creation. Is Amshichum B'chinas Eagle. They brought it from the circle. The way God is beyond the world, not within the world, beyond the world. Darkness and light is the same. There's no levels. God is one with Atzilus, but He's not one with Bria. Why? God is one with everything. It's just a question of revealing that oneness. That's our job. Our job in this world is to reveal the oneness of God in every part of creation. God is equal, one big and small. There's nothing bigger for God or smaller for God. God could lower Himself to be revealed in the most lowest of places. From the essence of God, everything's equal. And so he says, it was and this is when Chana started. She said, "Vispal al Hashem." She spoke beyond God. Al means like above. In order to bring God into the world of hosts, she had to go beyond the name, because the name is already starting in the system. That's what we say, Hashem, Hashem. There's different levels within the name of Hashem itself. Let's go to Sif Dalet to get to the answer of what does this have to do with our parsha. It's all nice, but what's up to do with our parsha? This is what it means. On the essence of the day, the army of God left Egypt. What does it mean, the army of God? It's to say that the army is not that God is in the God of hosts, but in the armies of God, the people become one with the essence of God. We elevate it, not bringing down. It's not a description of God. What does it mean that the armies of God went out of Egypt? What are we describing? Not just the Jewish people. These are the nitzutzos, these are the sparks, that were elevated by the Jewish work in 210 years of being in Egypt, Begalas Mitzrayim, and all the other sparks that we're going to bring up. There's remaining 86 sparks that we've been working on the past 3,000 plus years with Mashiach. They get elevated to the light, to the essence of God. The army of God. There were 288 sparks fell with the broken of the vessels. And 202 of them fell in to Egypt, and they were elevated when the Jewish people were in Egypt. That they saved Egypt. Because of this is why it says Erev Rav. Rav is 202. Alitam, that means that's describing the sparks. Rav Loch, we find other places where it describes the level of Rav, which is 202 sparks. What does it mean that these are the army of God? That it's God, but this is the army of God. These are different names of God. When they get elevated, from the world of separation, to the root, they lose their identity of names, because names, like we said before, is a description. They go back to their source, with the absolute oneness, and therefore there's no more name. These are just tzivais, the sparks that fell back to Havaya, back to Hashem. But the idea, the example given is, let's say a person wants to contemplate about God's greatness. Then your mind is feeling as something. I understand the subject. But when you totally nullify yourself, you don't feel like you are understanding something about God. You get totally nullified within God. It's not about feeling anymore. Anytime you feel something, it's an existence. When you sort of say have no feeling, not because you're not interested, because you're totally nullified, that's a oneness. So too these sparks of Tayu, of the world of chaos, that fell in the breaking, they have names. Each name is this one of these 202 sparks have their own identity. Just like any name is a way to define and to be recognized by someone else. A person alone doesn't need a name. Only when someone wants to know who are you, then you have to walk around with the name tag. Your friend has to know who you are. But once they get separated and elevated, they lose their identity. They go back to the source. Totally nullified. To become one with godliness. Then they have no name at all. They are the sparks that once were, that now will become one with God. They become one with God. Again, there's a very this we the Mammar is basically really talking about the names, but it goes at the end to the Tzvais Hashem. The idea is, what does this mean to us leaving Egypt? That when the Jewish people left Egypt, they elevated from the world of separation. That's what Yosef saw. Yosef saw it way ahead of his brothers. The brothers thought that they're just gathering things. Yosef said, no, it's not enough. You're bringing that even higher. You're going to totally nullify what you've done to go back. It's because when you're taking something that's never been and trying to put it back to one is one thing. But this was always part of God. It just fell. It became a separation in the level of revelation. When you bring it back, it loses its identity because it never really had an identity in the first place. What does it mean that God took the Jewish people al tzivayisam above the tzivayis? The Jewish people are above the sparks, because if you're below the sparks, how could you elevate the sparks? The Jewish people, again, like I said, are always essentially connected to God, and we go down into the darkness, into the challenges, into the 210 years of Egypt, to the thousands of years of Galus, because we have the ability to find those sparks, each person, whether you're conscious or subconscious, to connect it, to bring it back to its source, because we have an essential connection to Hashem. That's Al Tzivaisam, and Shemos Yisrael, souls of Jewish people, and M'amar the Rebbe they're above these sparks, and therefore they're able to elevate these sparks. And this is really the voda of birurim, of elevation, and hopefully we'll be finished that very soon, and we'll go back to the promised land of the Mashiach B'Karev. Thank you all for joining. And I know this was a very difficult Mammar. It doesn't get any easier with the years, but hopefully.
I have a question, just right quick, Rabbi. Can you just clarify when you say when you feel nothing, that's when you you are one with Hashem? Can you explain that?
I said there's two ways of feeling nothing. There's way of feeling nothing for the wrong reasons or the right reasons. It means you start that's why we start. We don't go sing Shema Yisrael right away. We start with Sukkot Zimmer. First, we start describing creation. We're part of that creation. But as we elevate and understand the purpose of creation and the power of creation, we reach the level of Shema Yisrael to be able to say that everything that we understand and we appreciate, and we're able to define God as great, and we describe the greatness of God and the compassion of God, all the things that we're describing, we describe the angels. The idea is to go from there. So we've learned in the Mammar of Yehuda, why does Yehuda is thankful to his brothers? Because through his brothers, he's able to get to self-nullification. But self-nullification on its own, the nothingness without avoda, is something that is something broken inside you. But nothingness that comes after avoda, after work, is a completion within you. It's a difference of a completion or a brokenness. So the nothingness is because essentially we are nothing. We're a part of creation. But in order to get there, you have to come as a whole person as opposed to a broken person. Even though we say a broken heart, we're talking about breaking your animal side. But the nothingness is from a completeness. That's why Yehuda comes after Reuven, Shimon, Levi. After we've recognized the greatness of God, we've recognized the creation, we recognize who we are, and we want. But then by getting deeper and deeper into that understanding, we climb up. Like we realize that the name is just a manifestation. We want to go to the essence, and the essence is the simplicity, and we want to get connected to that simplicity.
That kind of goes hand in hand with what I've been reading in this book, Gate of Trust. And we can talk about it more tomorrow. I'll reread it and I'll have my question for you tomorrow when we do the schmooze so we can talk about it. Okay. All right. Thank you.